Everyone and their mother, of course, has an opinion of the Florida Gators hiring Jonathan Decoster, but I went and got the opinion of those who actually worked with him here on Locked On Gators.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. Happy Tuesday. I'm Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Giants Country and NFL 33. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? You ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Pathfinder, or Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. And so yesterday, I voiced my opinion of the Florida Gators and Billy Napier hiring Jonathan Decoster, and it was rather negative. And I think most opinions surrounding Jonathan Decoster getting hired have been, well, negative. And that is what it is. And I know that there's a bunch of people who go, well, you didn't coach, so you don't get the opinion. You didn't play, so you don't get the opinion, whatever it may be. And that's sure. If that's the criteria you want to put, then sure. But I did go out and get the opinion of some people that worked or played under Jonathan Decoster throughout his career. And he spent 2017 to 2019 with the LSU Tigers as the GA with tight ends. So I went out and I got someone who was a tight end for LSU from 2016 to 2019. And I asked him about Jonathan Decoster. And that was Jamal Pettigrew, who also played for the LA Rams last season. And he said, Coach Decoster is a great coach and an even better person. He helped me grow as a football player and as a man. He especially helped me grow the blocking aspect of my game, which is what I'm known for and why I was blessed with an opportunity to play in the NFL. The Florida Gators hired a great coach, and I can't wait to see how those offensive linemen grow under him. And I do think that it's important to acknowledge that Jamal Pettigrew pointed out the blocking part of this, because one, that is what got Jamal Pettigrew to the NFL. And two, that was when Jamal Pettigrew was working with tight ends or playing tight end. Then Jonathan Decoster had 1 year coaching tight ends as the tight ends coach of Old Dominion. And then he went on to the Browns, where he worked with the offensive line for the most part. And that brings us to our next quote from Jedrick Wills, former first-round pick of the Cleveland Browns. Probably going to get a pretty nice payday when he hits free agency. But Cleveland Browns offensive tackle Jedrick Wills, who, again, Jonathan Decoster was with the Browns for the past 3 seasons. He's been there. And Jedrick Wills said, I think he'll be good once he gets a chance to actually coach. He was a big help during our individual drills, and he was always exceptional when it came to game plans, cards, and executing tasks. Overall, he's a young, cool dude, which I know, obviously, quotes are quotes. You can do whatever you want with them. I will say the 2 player quotes that we got about Jonathan Decoster, both obviously glowing recommendations, both glowing, but also one big thing that I do think that you've seen a lot with this Florida Gators coaching staff. We've seen it a lot from who Billy Napier likes to hire, is that character aspect of that. And look, I will talk more about this 2 O-line coach approach in the next segment. We will get to that, in my opinion, on that. But as far as Jonathan Decoster goes, like these quotes at least make me feel better about the hire being Jonathan Decoster himself. Like, I'm still going to be hesitant on the move and until something is actually proven, which you can't do until you put the pads on and until you hit the trail and all that. But I will say that as far as he's a great guy. He helped me grow as a man. That's going to be something where when we talk about recruiting and we talk about it's the relationships and the parents that have a play in it, that's going to resonate, I think. I think that players will see that and parents will see that and parents will go, okay, I'm comfortable giving my son to this team and to this coach, and I'm comfortable with that. I will say again, the coaching aspect of this is going to be very important because, like Jedrick Will said, when he gets the chance to actually coach, because he wasn't a full blown coach here. He was an offensive assistant with the Cleveland Browns and is now going to be a co-offensive line coach for the Florida Gators. And I think that again, like I can critique it. Everybody else that works in media can critique it or not if they don't want to. Fans can critique it. But at the end of the day, it's the players who do have to deal with it. And it's the players here that have said, hey, like he helped me a lot. And that's an important part here because the Florida Gators offensive line wasn't just bad in 2023. It was downright awful. And I know that there's that graphic that goes around of like the second worst offensive line in the country. That's not true. Like, we know that, right? Like we know that, yeah, the offensive line wasn't good, but we know it wasn't the second worst in the country, right? So there is room to grow. Obviously, they do need a lot of help and a lot of development. And I do think that having someone like Jonathan Decoster, who Jedrick Wills has now publicly praised and has said, hey, like he helped me a lot. And Jamal Pettigrew, who again went from LSU to he played a senior season at McNeese State. His COVID season was at McNeese State, and then he went on to the LA Rams. And he was like, hey, yeah, like the blocking part of it was big. And I do think it's also telling about where Jonathan Decoster is better as a coach, because obviously coaches have their things. Like Alabama a decade and a half ago could get guys to the NFL, but they were doing it with that weird, like the 3-quarter technique. And it kept leaving guys that's like, yeah, you can get to the NFL, but you're not going to thrive there. And there's certain things that coaches do and where coaches are better than others. And for Jonathan Decoster, he seems to be developing blocking ability. And of course, blocking from a tight end is different from blocking on the offensive line. However, we do have an offensive lineman that's like, yeah, he helped a lot. He was great in individuals. And I think that's also an important part where we go, he's great in individuals, where individual offensive linemen will improve. However, it's more up to, can Jonathan Decoster improve the unit as a whole? Or is Rob Sale going to be able to get this unit as a whole working in unison? Because, hey, that's what units do. So I do think that it's important to acknowledge that, yeah, I still will have my doubts about it. I do still have my doubts about it. It does make me feel better, again, that former players under Jonathan Decoster have said, hey, yeah, like he's great, helped me a lot, helped me develop as a player, and man, that's huge. Because again, when you think about coaching, it's not just, do you make them a better player? It's, do you make them a better player? Are you there for them? Can you help them grow? Like, it's not just all right, 3 hours of practice or however long practice is going to be that day, and then I'm out. See ya. It's a lot more about that. And also with Jedrick Wills saying that he helped a lot with game planning is an important part as well, because it's a Florida Gators team that can use all the help they need and all the help they can get when it comes to game planning and preparing, because that was also a major thing that we saw last season and the season before of just not showing up. And so hopefully Jonathan Decoster will help these guys get ready. And of course, yes, him having NFL experience absolutely helped, because he can look at these kids and say, hey, I coached in the NFL. I know what it takes to get there. Listen to me when I say this. We will talk about the 2 O-line coach approach, which has been under so much fire for Billy Napier, and really in recent years, but especially in recent weeks when you had a chance to make a change. We're going to talk about that in just a second, but first we're going to get a quick word from FanDuel. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 if your bet wins. Don't bet on the Warriors. Just saying, because I did. not to win. I had some props. And they lost by 52, was it? They were down by like 50-ish at half, didn't even bring out Steph, Clay, or Draymond for the second half, which, like, at that point, just go home. Like, just forfeit, call it, because that's disgusting and embarrassing. Monty Williams also, by the way, hate you. You cost me $1,400 on. I would have won $1,400 on Sunday, but down 20 with about 7.5 minutes left and didn't even bother playing starters. I'm just saying. Don't bet on the Pistons or the Warriors now. That's what we're doing. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. Remember that FanDuel is an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free reviews of the podcast. And now we have to have the conversation of the second offensive line coach that the Florida Gators have. And this is something that Billy Napier has had every year except for one throughout his head coaching career. And it's one that you kind of got when he came from Louisiana to Florida. You couldn't really hate on it much, right? You couldn't really say, "Oh, that's a stupid approach. It's never going to work." It was innovative, it was new, and it was unique, and that was something where you can't say, "Oh, this is proven that it's not going to work." However, to this point, it has not worked. But when he brought it over from Louisiana, they had a lot of success on the offensive line in Louisiana. Looking back, or just looking at that in retrospect, you can look at it and say, well, they had a lot of success on the offensive line, specifically running the ball, and they were out recruiting everybody in the Sun Belt. They were consistently out recruiting everybody. I think it was 3 years in a row. They had the number one class in the Sun Belt, and they were just mowing dudes down. Like that's what they were doing. They were just bringing in these giant maulers, developing them, and letting them just mow dudes down. And then that worked for them. That did. I think that's one of the reasons that you can't say the two offensive line coach approach is one that won't work in the NFL, but it hasn't worked here. And one of the reasons that there's been so much backlash of this hire of Jonathan Decoster is there was an easy chance for Billy Napier to deviate from the plan without firing anyone. There was an easy way, easy chance to do it, because Darnell Stapleton left and he went to the Commanders. And so you had a coaching spot. You could have gone with a full-time OC, could have gone with an on-field special teams coordinator, could have gone with a lot of things. Chose to go with second offensive line coach. And that's where you're going to catch flack, because you just had the two offensive line coach and it didn't work. It wasn't working. It wasn't even close to working last year. You had a chance to deviate and you chose to stick to your guns. And I think for me personally, I'm at the point where I think one offensive line coach is the way to go. And it's not that I think the two offensive line coach approach can't work. I think you got to nail it. I think that's part of it. That you have to absolutely nail it with two coaches who can do that successfully, consistently, and recruit that way. And I understand Billy Napier's thought process of saying, well, there's about 15 players in the offensive line room. Really hard in one position group to have one guy coach all of those. But there's a reason most teams have one on-field offensive line coach. Obviously, the huge majority of teams and schools have an offensive line coach and an assistant offensive line coach that's not an on-field assistant. Florida has them on field. And I feel like for being a Florida Gators team that they have like the 5=1 hats, I feel like when you have those, and I understand what you're saying with the hats, like if 5=1, like you're a unit, if you're all in sync, yeah. I feel like the one part of that should maybe be embraced a bit more. Because where I stand from it, and I spoke to a couple of former Gators offensive linemen who asked to not be named, which is why I can't say the names. But they were here under Billy Napier, and they're no longer here. So they were here with Rob Sale and Darnell Stapleton. And again, they're no longer with the Florida Gators. Where they said that they were like the two offensive line coach thing was confusing for me. Because you'll have Coach Sale tell you one thing and Coach Stapleton tell you another. And even if they mean the same thing, they're coaching you to do it in different ways. And I understand where some players like that and some don't like it. But I feel like at that point, you're kind of just going against the grain for the sake of going against the grain, if that makes sense. The huge majority of teams and schools have one on-field offensive line coach on that staff. And that's the person who, what they say, goes. And so there's not a mixed signal issue. It's clearly not giving you a recruiting advantage to this point, at least. And in fact, we've heard that it could be a little bit of a recruiting disadvantage at some points, again, because who's really like who's working with my son directly? What is this? Who's working with me directly? What is this approach that we're taking? What's the development plan? We've heard that there've been some players that like that again, and there's been some players that don't like that. However, we never really heard prior to this of players going, I don't like the one offensive line coach. And so it feels like you're deviating from the group just to deviate from the group at that point. Like if it's not working, which to this point it's not. And again, I'm not trying to kill. I'm not trying to kill what Billy Napier does. I'm not trying to kill what Rob Sale does. I'm not trying to kill what Jonathan Decoster does. I'm fully open to Jonathan Decoster working out. Like I don't mean to bash him at any point. Like great, you got an opportunity, make the most of it, and that's what you got to do. But I am saying that at this point, I feel like we're kind of just going against the grain just to go against the grain. Because 2022, you had a good offensive line that, first off, it was a good offensive line that was helped by having the most athletic quarterback to ever touch a football field. And again, I don't care what you say about that. Stats show me. And by that, I mean like the testing times and the relative athletic score show me he is the most athletic quarterback that's ever touched a football field. So I don't care how you feel about me saying that. It was helped by that. Teams couldn't be as aggressive because they had to watch AR's legs. You couldn't let him run behind you. Teams couldn't get sacks because Anthony Richardson could outrun them. Things like that. It was helped by that. Okay? And also teams defending the run kept getting baited by that zone read. You had to keep someone, and then you're playing one down in that box, and that's how things happened. And so 2022, you had a good offensive line that was helped a lot by Anthony Richardson. 2023, you had a horrible offensive line. And both years, you haven't done an awesome job recruiting. So this just feels like something where maybe it was time to let it go. And after this season, we'll look back and we'll know if it was the right move or not, based on how the offensive line plays this year. We'll know if it worked out or not. But for the time being, I'm going to remain hesitant to say I love it. And like I said, like it helped me. It does help me a lot that someone like Jedrick Wills, who was my top offensive tackle when he was coming out of Alabama in 2020, it helped me to know that that he's a big fan of what Jonathan Decoster did and that he felt Jonathan Decoster is helpful and effective. Having an NFL offensive lineman and an NFL tight end say, yeah, he helped me a lot and he's a cool guy and he helped me grow as a man. I feel like those are ringing endorsements, and I will take ringing endorsements. It's not one of those things where I'm just going to be like, well, of course they're going to know. Because when Gerald Chapman got hired, we took the endorsements. When everybody got hired, we took the endorsements. I'm not writing Jonathan Decoster off. I am going to say, though, that I'm hesitant on this move. But now his spring starts this week. We knew that the hire was going to get done before spring ball. That was the plan. and now we're here. So it's time for us to, yes, get ready for spring football. And I'm starting with this offensive line because it's going to be one of the biggest story points, one of the biggest storylines, which we'll talk about in a second. But first, we are going to get a quick word from Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things just a little further? Do you ever wonder what adventure could be right around the next corner? I do. I have a little fun. Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. And like I've mentioned before, like I'm a big fan of, first off, New York City. I like to drive because we go to Jersey kind of a lot. And so we drive through the city for that. And then on the way back, we'll stop in Manhattan somewhere and drive away. We like to go upstate in the summer and the winter. Nice little mountain ranges up here. But Nissan's incredible lineup also includes the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder, which has room for up to 8, an expansive cargo capacity, and advanced available 4x4 capability, and the 2024 Nissan Armada, which will change what you expect from a full-size SUV. Picture a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 in first-class luxury and style. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure at shopnissanusa.com. To wrap up today's show, we are talking about the offensive line here on Locked On Gators because we're kind of going into spring ball with something that we kind of dealt with last year too, because 2022 we had that season, and then after the 2022 season, you had Kingsley Eguakun coming back at center. You had lost Michael Tarquin to the transfer portal, who was your starting right tackle. You lost Richard Garage, who was your starting left tackle, to the NFL. You lost Ethan White, who was your starting left guard, to the transfer portal. And then you lost Osiris Torrance, who was your starting right guard, to the NFL. So the only player you had coming back was Kingsley Eguakun. And the question surrounding that was, who's going to be starting around him? We knew Austin Barber would be at one of the tackle spots, and everything else was kind of a toss-up. Then now we're going into the 2024 spring, the 2024 offseason, and we look at center. It's Jake Slaughter, who's coming back. You lost both of your guards, which is fun, both of them, to the transfer portal at that. Richie Leonard to Florida State and Michael Mazuka to, I believe it was Nebraska or Arkansas. He was deciding between one of those red and white schools, and he picked one of them, obviously. It was Nebraska because he started his career with Matt Rule. So you lost both your starting guards there. Austin Barber is back as one of your tackles, and Damian George, your other starting tackle, is moving into guard. So second year in a row where we go, okay, most of the line's gone, or changing positions, I guess. It's an interesting spot to be in. Personally, then, because again, we're going into another offseason of who's going to start. And so personally for me, I'm putting Austin Barber and Brandon Crenshaw-Dickson at the tackle spots. I don't necessarily care which one goes at which tackle spot. I think that you go through camp, and whichever one works better at each spot, or whichever one gives you the best bookends, you do that. Because both Austin Barber and Brandon Crenshaw-Dickson have started games at both tackle spots. Brandon Crenshaw-Dickson did it better at both tackle spots. Personally, I think Austin Barber is better at right tackle than he is at left. And I do think that Austin Barber has a decently high ceiling when we talk about NFL. But I do think that teams that see him at left tackle and go back to even what he did as a redshirt freshman at right tackle, they're probably going to go, hey, man, maybe this spot's better for you. Make more money as left tackle, but if you have a longer career, you'll make more money at right tackle. But Austin Barber, Brandon Crenshaw-Dickson, you just go at it, and you just say, hey, whichever one is best, especially because it's going to come down to also which one performs better with the guard next to them, because that's going to be a big part of that as well. So just whichever one wins the battle, and you just roll with that. And I don't care who it is. I don't have necessarily like, if Austin Barber has a better career at right tackle, but he's going to be better for the Florida Gators at left tackle, and put him there. I don't care. Win the games. On the interior, I think you're looking at Najee Harris at one of the spots because, again, you're replacing both guys on the interior. Again, with Richie Leonard to Florida State and Micah Mazuka to Nebraska. But when you're looking at Najee Harris, you look at someone who, as a freshman, played a good bit, I guess, at least early on. And he started one game. I think he might have started the Arkansas game with Micah Mazuka. I believe he was out. But Najee Harris played both guard spots, played a little bit of center as well throughout the 2023 season as a true freshman. So Najee Harris could play both guard spots. Damian George is moving into guard. Rod Kearney, please give him a chance at guard. I understand last year they moved him to center. He played guard in high school. Like, just give him a chance at guard. Just let him into the battle and just duke it out. And whoever wins, wins. Personally, I don't care because with Damian George, it's also, he's never played guard in a game before. Like, that's a thing too that I'm tired of hearing in Twitter spaces and just seeing on social media and everything of he's better at guard. We don't know that. All we know is that he wasn't good at tackle. We don't know he'll be good at guard. We don't know he'll be better at guard. We can say, oh, I think he'll be better at guard, which is my opinion. But I need people to stop going, oh, he's definitively good at guard. Like, he's definitively better at guard. We don't know that. That's not a thing you can say. He practiced at guard, yes. He's only played tackle. In his career, he has 0 snaps at either guard spot, okay? We need to stop acting like definitively he's going to be the answer there. All we know is that he can't play tackle, and so we're trying guard. That's all we know there. So Najee Harris, Rod Kearney, Damian George, I don't care who you give the battle to. I don't care if it's Christian Williams you want to throw in there, if not Jalen Farmer, Riley Simons is going to get more snaps there. I don't care. Just find the combination that works. We know Najee Harris is the best guard you have right now. I don't care if you move someone else into guard. I don't care what it is. But you've got the guys there that should be able to figure something out at guard. And if Rod Kearney, like, I think you have to give Rod Kearney a shot there. Jake Slaughter at center should be the answer. He had a great year last year, and I know so many people, for some reason, wanted to be Rod Kearney over Jake Slaughter, and I get it that Rod Kearney, he was, I think, my favorite offensive lineman that year in that class from Florida. He was one of my favorite commits in that class in 2023. But Jake Slaughter had a damn good year at center. And also, I will say this, not to be snobby or snotty or anything. Offensive line is probably the most difficult thing to evaluate for, like, who, as an individually, who's at fault, who messed up, who did well, who did their job, whatever it is. Jake Slaughter was good last year. Like, I'm telling you this factually. He was good last year. I'm not going to say, oh, well, Rod Kearney was rated high as a recruit, so give it to him. No, you put your best 5 out there. And if you have a guy that you know is good at center and a guy that in high school played guard, why are you switching things? This is the SEC. Make it easy. Put your best 5 out there. And I think your best 5 will be a combination of Austin Barber, Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon, Najee Harris, Rod Kearney, and Jake Slaughter. But I do think that Damian George is more likely to start a guard over Rod Kearney, whether they give him the opportunity to compete there or not. But I think that if you're Florida, like, you have to figure out your best 5, and you just go, all right, this is our best 5, run it, bet. Like, and just run out there with that. Because for Florida, your offensive line needs to improve. You have no excuses. You have Rob Sale in year 3. You have a new Jonathan Decoster as your co-offensive line coach here. So if Darnell Stapleton was the issue, which I don't believe he was, I think, again, part of it's the combination of 2 offensive line coaches. But if Darnell Stapleton was the issue, we're about to have an answer. If Rob Sale never should have been the hire, we're going to have an answer. And we'll have this figured out with the offensive line for the Florida Gators, which desperately needs to get figured out. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day, we are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Giants Country and NFL 33, and I'll see you all next time.